wishing you all a super warm welcome to Connecting with Purpose, where we connect with winners and thought leaders from multiple sectors to provide you with a 360-degree view on purpose. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Our purpose, to inspire you to unlock your potential and optimize your performance and impact. Hi guys, welcome to episode 6 of Connecting with Purpose. I'm excited to be joined by David Madden, who's had a thriving career in financial and professional services, which led him to be the co-founder of Mikosi 14 years ago, which has been a disruptor in the auditing industry and trailblazing a new model essentially for on-demand audits, both for their clients and for their auditors. And as we'll see, David's journey has been very much values and impact driven. And as a result of that, really excited to welcome him on behalf of Purpose Fused to join us on our Connecting with Purpose podcast. So, David, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Good man. Well, if you've listened to any of our previous ones, you know what I'm going to kick off with, which is rather than running through your biography, I'm going to throw it over to you and instead ask, as you look back on your career, which has been, pretty entrepreneurial and successful, obviously. If you had to distill it down into sort of 3 magic moments that really stood out to you, what would they be? And just to give you a bit of context, we think of a magic moment as a benchmark experience. It's like if you'd give it a score out of 10, it'd be a 10 out of 10. And it's something that was pivotal in your development for whatever reason. So the question is, what are your 3 magic moments? What is it that made them magic? And if you had to give each of them a name, what would you call them?
Yeah, well, I guess magic moments never seem too magical in the moment, but you look back on them and you realize that they are. So I think, look, I left Sydney when I was 23 to go to the UK. I said to myself, if I don't get this job I'm going for, I'm going to go leave and I'm going to go try something different. I didn't get the job. They shouldn't have hired me, so that was a good decision. So I left and I went to the UK, and I then said, okay, well, I'm going to get that same job in the UK. So I started training on that job, and it was kind of moving along nicely. But I was 23, and then I had an option to go skiing and traveling. And then I figured that was probably a better way to spend my time in my 20s than sitting on a trading desk, trading currencies. So yeah, for the next 7 years, I pretty much worked and traveled. So I'd work and do lots of hours and earn my sterling. And then I go spend it all for 3 months going through Asia or snowboarding or whatever it was in the Alps. And I think the thing why that was a big moment for me is I just realized there was another path. I realized there was another path outside of it. Get a full-time job, do that, work up the ladder, retire, all the rest of it. So that one you could maybe call, what could you call that? Lost, but really we'll call it a new chapter. I think the next one for me, so, I kind of did 7 years in London, and then I went to New York, and I was doing a project in New York for a bank out there, and I was desperate. I would do anything to stay in New York. I just needed a work visa. So I'd had a job offer from a bank before the visa went through. It was a whole story. And then I got introduced to a South African guy who had just started a business, and we met in a bar after we got introduced by a friend. And the deal was he'll get me a visa, he'll take 10% of whatever I earn. And I was so happy with that. And I just said, look, you don't need to babysit me. I'll just go find my own work. Just get me to New York. That's all I care about right now. I just want to be here. So, 6 months later, we spun up a division in the banking world that I was in. And it was just incredibly successful. We grew that thing. We grew that thing eventually to about $15 million in revenue and created a whole business around it. So that was probably the next step. And, that was a relationship, that was just a random relationship that some guy was floating out there and we got connected and it really worked out well. And that guy's now my best mate and my business partner. And then probably the last one would be, we had a lot of success growing the business initially. We're in the banking sector in 2007, 2008, probably the worst thing to be in any business. But thankfully, the business ended up being pretty resilient through that. But, we went through a really big growth curve and then it kind of tapered off. And it tapered off probably to about 2011, 2012. And I just remember sitting in an office, some, WeWork equivalent before WeWork was invented. And we just sat at each other and we said, like, what are we actually doing here? Like, are we going to give this thing a go? Because, we get up, we go for our bike ride around Central Park. It's pretty good. We don't have a boss. That's pretty good. But we're not earning enough money. We know we're worth more than this. So what are we going to do about it? And, it was just this decision to say, look, I just got to be committed, because right now I'm in this no man's land. So just be committed and do what I need to do to grow this. Now, a lot of it was unknown, as most business owners go into when they don't know what they're doing. But it was just like the actual decision of being committed, and being committed for us together at the same time created this force. And then we kind of went on another tear as well in that business and kind of grew that several fold upwards. So, that one I'd probably call just make it happen.
Got it. And so what are some of the themes for you then that have stood out for you as being pivotal in driving success in those various different businesses that you've that you've nurtured and grown?
Yeah. Honestly, it's teamwork, right? It's finding the right team, because there's an old saying, or there's a book, I can't remember the name of it, Good to Great, I think, by Jim Collins. It says, like, get the right people on the bus. Got the right people on the bus, you're halfway there. So, I think there was this spirit that we had to just never really give up, and just to make it happen and be okay with failure and just kind of keep turning up. So I think that was a part of it as well. But like, we just had a lot of confidence in ourselves, because we just thought, well, what have we got to lose? So, we knew we spun something up from nothing. So we knew we could, we could do it again. And I think the view I always had, and, maybe it was an egotistical view of when I was getting sent to clients to work on consulting contracts, I'm thinking they're not doing anything different. But like, what are they doing that I can't do? So for me, that's always been a kind of driving force, to kind of just feel that nothing's really unachievable if you just get the right team and just don't give up and just be extremely resilient. So they're more kind of mindset things rather than foundational, hey, I got this great process or that great structure. I mean, that kind of stuff came along, eventually as the business grew. But it's more mindset for me.
Well, yeah. And I think at the end of the day, if you're talking about you've got the right people and you've got the right mindset, then you can build the right principles and behaviours for them to be successful. And if you've got the right people, you don't need too much other structure initially, right? Because you can kind of let them do what they do really well. And some of the structure and process and things are needed when you grow to a certain point. So that's really interesting to hear. And I guess the other theme, which would be consistent, is the leadership component. For you and your business partner, you've had to lead these teams through growth and through challenges with the resilience and so on and so forth. And obviously we're talking purpose fused about how you fuse purpose into basically into the culture of the business, and as a leader, how you infuse purpose into your leadership style. So just interested for you as a leader, what does purpose mean to you?
Purpose is, why am I getting out of bed to do all this? It's like, it's as simple as that. It's rather than going through the motions, like, what's my why? Why even go to all this work? Why go to all this risk? Why go to all this, potential stress and heartbreak and failures and all the rest? Like, why? So for me, purpose is just the why behind it all. There are obviously a number of other factors, but for me, that's it. And then I guess the other piece is like, what difference do I want to make? Like, when I'm looking back and I'm taking my last few breaths, like, what am I going to be proud of? So that's what drives me.
I'm going to dig into that actually in a little bit, but I was interested in just as you're talking about the impact piece there, Mikosi, you've done quite a lot of transformation work in the embedding of values and disrupting an industry norm, really. And I think for a lot of people that have been involved with you, reinventing what it means to work in the practice of audit, and pulling just some quotes and things off your website that seem to me so like non-audit, right? Just from my my background, and you've got things like setting you up for an extraordinary life, being an ambassador for change, life-changing mindset, altering training, and even hooking people up with their next engagement, even if it's not you guys, by developing activating your network to support people that have worked for you to find the next thing. And so I'm really interested in that culture that you've built. What is it that's or how has that enabled you to set yourselves apart, I guess, is the first question. And then what were some of the things that you've been able to do that drove the success in creating that culture that's really so much about empowering people and enabling to be the best version of themselves?
You know, look, a lot of businesses get created because people have gaps of what they see could be filled from their own experience. You know, so for me, you know, in my days when I was in London, or some of my days in New York, when I would be consulting for companies, you know, there's a part where you just feel like you're a number and you don't have any buy-in. You have buy-in to your paycheck, or you have buy-in to whatever the next thing you need to get is, but there's no buy-in to the business or what they're about or why they're there. They just happen to be there. Now, again, that was my experience at a certain time in my life. It may not be applicable to everyone, but I think that probably resonates with a few people. So, you know, our view was always like, you actually don't need to do that much more than what the baseline is. For me, I always try to think, just do an extra 5%. If you do that extra 5%, like, that's the stuff that makes the difference. You know, if you're going to go do 100 push-ups, do 105, right? If you're going to go, you know, like, these are the kind of things that we try to think about. So what are those extra little 5% we can do for people to give them a good experience working for us, to know what the issues are and to give them that good experience? And it's all common sense. And, you know, we don't have a magic formula and potion and all the rest of it to make this thing happen. But we just know it's important to give people that, because, you know, right now the world is in a state where people don't stick around at companies for 20 years anymore. You know, you can pick out any stream of data that you want to have a look at where people just move, you know, but the new generation, and, you know, hats off to them, it's less about the paycheck, it's more about the purpose. So, you know, to build a business around that makes sense because A, it's just the right thing to do, right? That's the company that you want to work for. I don't want to turn up and run a business or run a division and not proud of what I see politics or fighting or, you know, all this kind of stuff. It happens, but you know, less more than others in purpose-filled organizations. But it's just, you know, people, that's who people want to work for, and they will work hard knowing that you're committed to it. And, you know, I think the important thing is, I think corporate, you know, I'm in California, so I'll say corporate America, but I think the world around is, you know, people are getting to that point where they need to realize, like, that needs to be important for you to attract the best team. And let's be honest, you want to attract the best team, you've got to give them a reason to join. But more importantly, you've got to give a reason to stay there. So all this stuff that we talk about, look, it's important. It's really important, but it needs to be alive. You know, like Enron had on their wall integrity. I mean, how did that work out, right? Was it on the wall or was it alive in the organization, right? So all this stuff needs to be alive, and that's what keeps people wanting to work for us.
Yeah, I mean, and we've actually, I mean, we just wrote a white paper a month ago or so on literally recruiting with purpose, because it needs to become the norm. At the moment, if you do that in the right way, it can be a differentiator to attract the right talent, but only obviously if it's authentic. And for it to be authentic, that means you actually do have to have a company that has a very clear purpose, and not just has a clear purpose that is maybe on the wall somewhere, but actually they're doing the extra 5% to bring it to life, to bring it into the culture, to demonstrate that, so that when they have recruited the talent in there, the experience that they have aligns with the promise that they've been given. And so, as you think about the extra 5% and the ways you've been able to bring the purpose to life, what are some examples of things that you've been able to do that you know that would demonstrate that and would attract talent and retain talent in what you're doing?
Yeah. Look, it's, I'll kind of give an example briefly from, a call I had a couple of hours ago with the team, so we're growing a new division and we're growing really fast. And we've brought in a lot of senior people from a lot of different places. And how we run the business is not how they've been in businesses before, It's just, they're used to a big corporate structure with, politics and just all the other elements that go with big business. Not good or bad, just it is what it is. So when I sit down with them and talk about the conversation we had today was around trust, why it's important to build trust and what we need to do to build trust as a team. And, one of the comments was, look, we get it. We just want to get back and deliver for our clients, which is great. But what I said to them is me continually talk about this. The key for me as a leader is, how do I get people to work together? Right, so whether it's diversity or diversity of experience, whatever it is, how do I get people to work together for a common reason, right? Because my view is very simple. If we can get, as leaders, if you can get 10% more out of your team because they're focusing on clients and output rather than politics and questions and all the rest of it because the business isn't doing a good job of managing their expectations. Well, if I have 100 people, I just got 15 extra full-time employees, right? 10 to 15 extra full-time employees. So economically, it makes sense for me to care about it. Now, that's not the primary reason why you do it. It's an offshoot benefit. But that's kind of one way I look at it from the numbers perspective. But the other perspective is we're all in relationships. And when you're in a relationship with someone at work, it's much like a relationship you have with a wife or a husband or, whoever it is. There's got to be foundational elements for that relationship to work. So I think that's the stuff that we really try and instill. But that was just something that happened today, just as a typical day-by-day example. But I think the big thing that we did was values. We really sat down, and I remember it years ago. I was sitting down with my business partner, and we said, what is it that's made us successful? How do we take the best of what we are and try to roll that through the organization? And that was the lens that we took to kind of build values. What are our core values? And it was a cool process to go through because you're kind of looking through your life and why was I successful and why wasn't I successful and what did I bring to the table or how did I solve a certain problem? And, there's a consistency there, so we kind of built those values based off our own experience. And myself and my business partner, two very different personalities, but together I think we work very well, And the biggest thing was rolling them out across the organization. I think we're in a time right now where people talk about this stuff a lot, but if you went inside that organization and looked and reported back, would you actually see it alive in the organization, or would it just be on a PowerPoint that people send to clients? So being able to measure that is really, really important. So there are a number of things that we kind of did to do that. First was define what they are, Next was define what they're not. So this is what fits a value, this is what doesn't. And, there was a really good book I read on a flight back from Chicago to New York one time called Traction. And there was a whole kind of operating system, they call it EOS. And there's a whole operating system around just tools and templates that you can do to run your business. And that was really insightful. And one of them was around values, get clear on your values. But more importantly, hire people and let people go according to them. So even if you have an 18 person who's toxic, you got to let them go. It's hard sometimes, but when you're committed to it, it's not that hard. So I think some things we did, we measured them. So for someone, we would say, okay, you got 5 KPIs in your role. These are the things we need you to get done. Okay. And we're going to measure on them, whatever they are, skill-based, competency-based. But then you would have values. And every quarter you would get assessed. You show them some of the time, none of the time, all of the time. And if someone kept showing them none to some, that would be a cause for some kind of conversation. So listen, you're off here. Okay. Talk about why it's important. Going to give you a chance to turn it around. But, some people just couldn't turn it around because they didn't have the same values. And, that's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole sometimes, Yeah. So I think that piece was really important. And I think, we did smaller things every Monday morning we've had a huddle and people would get given out a core values trophy and, they get voted on who showed a core value, the previous few weeks and that kind of stuff. So it started kind of living in the organization a little bit more. It wasn't on the leaders to kind of push this down. Now it was kind of coming from the bottom up, which is what you want. Obviously, you don't want to be a bottleneck in these kind of things. But, there was one experience that I had. We went through the business, and look, businesses go like this, right? I mean, every business does. And, there was a bit where we weren't doing so good, and, we were downsizing, and we had to say, look, we just got to make some cuts, okay? So, it's just what we have to do. It wasn't nice, but it was just what we had to do. When we went through the lens of this lens we're talking about now, right, we probably let go of 40% of our internal team. We lost 10% of output as a result. And what ended up happening is the people that got let go, they just weren't right for the business. Not bad people, don't dislike them, like anything like that. Just not a good fit. That's all, right? And I think the thing you need to kind of have in context is you want people to be in roles they want to be in. You don't want someone to kind of try to be that square peg fitting themselves into a round hole. It's just stressful. They don't enjoy it. We don't enjoy managing them, and it's just not a good fit. So it's really important to kind of let people be free and go do something else. And hopefully by letting them be free, they'll be happy because they knew it wasn't a good fit anyway. But I think when we started doing that, people go, and we'd just be open and honest with people about it. And most times it's not news to them. They're like, yep, okay, I agree as well. So there are a couple of things that we did to roll it out. And, quite frankly, it just made it a much more fun business to run, because it was just clear about what we're about.
As you're evolving as an organisation and growing over time, and then downsizing at other times, being able to make those decisions based on values, it makes it actually that much clearer and that much simpler. And also, you feel that much more confident afterwards that you've done it in the right way as well, because it's easy for people to understand that, and they probably feel it themselves anyway, that it probably wasn't quite the right.
And look, we've all been in relationships that haven't worked, right? Romantic, whatever, and you just know it, right? But you just kind of feel like you got to keep showing up. You got to muscle through it, but it's just not a good fit. So I think just having the framework to go through hiring people, letting people go and all the rest of it through this, it just provides transparency. And that's what I think a lot of people want. They just want to know, like, what am I getting judged of? What's important here? And if we give you the framework and you can't get it done, then okay, that's fine. Maybe this isn't the right place for you. It's not good or bad, it just is. So maybe you should go find somewhere that is the right place for you. But I just find in a lot of places like there's just this lack of transparency. People don't know what they need to do or be to be successful, because there may be 8 different opinions. So I think trying to build it from that is really important. And also, like, I need to be held accountable to that stuff. So by all means, if I'm not holding up the values, like, someone's got to flag it to me. And I've also got to be able to respond in the right way to know that, okay, this is about what's best for the business, not about what's best for Dave.
Right. Yeah. No. So you as a leader, you've got to model those values. You've got to share the values. You've got to model values. And in our model, which we kind of always have purpose as the foundational component to sort of a bunch of building blocks, right? But the things that bring the purpose to life, first and foremost, we say principles, that they're values in action. That's the way are their behaviours, right? So if the value is trust, what's a behaviour that exhibits that, and how do we continue to be able to exhibit that behaviour? So you talked about trust. Actually, you gave an example of it from earlier today. I'm just actually interested. You talk about building trust, and you've grown a significant division. You've got a lot of senior people that come in, and so this was a conversation that you wanted to have. What were the messages? How do you build trust in your organisation, and how would you want other people to develop that themselves?
Yeah. Well, first is get the feedback from the team. My question is simple: rating out of 10. How's trust between us all right now? Okay. All right. 5, 4, 3, whatever it is. Okay. Cool. Well, let's start with the truth and work backwards from there. So why is it? What's missing? And some of the pieces is it's new, right? Everyone hasn't worked together, right? So, okay, am I going to trust someone I've been on a second date with? All right, I'm not, right? Depending on who you are, like, maybe that's my downfall, but anyway, so I think it's just starting with there, like just having, like, I think the biggest thing for me is just having a simple scoring mechanism, right? So number one, we're all talking the same language. Out of 10, where are we at? And what's missing? But then the next level down is, okay, like, give me a specific example of why that is, right? Because, we all get lost in our own heads sometimes, and, without that communication to be able to talk about it, you can kind of build molehills into mountains. So I think it's just providing that framework. For me, it's the framework. It's just like get people talking, just to let them know, look, it's okay. This is how we run things here. This isn't going to be used against you. This isn't some tool that we're using to be manipulative. It's like, this is how we want to run because we know this is the best way to run. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's
no, it did, because it's the approach that you use, and I would guess that you use the same approach that you did for trust as you would use for any other word you want to put in there, which is have a scoring mechanism. We do that all the time. 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, just give us a score, because that gut reaction, everybody can come out with it. Then it's like, okay, so why are we here? What's led us to get here? What's an example of why we're here, and how do we want to close that gap? If we're a 6, how do we get it to a 9 or a 10? So I think that approach is a good approach, and what I like about it is that there's so many organizations are quite complex, and some products are complex, and markets are complex, and there's a really complex kind of ecosystem that in organizations that everything's connected. But if you really boil it all down, it's a bunch of people that believe in some of the same things and trying to get the same stuff done, right? And so having simple frameworks that simplify some of the complex things that otherwise might be the case are often the most effective way to tackle some of these challenges, and get the right people doing the right things at the right time, in the right way, supporting each other. And being able to clearly identify when those things aren't working, and that people are confident enough to speak up about it. So so I love that approach. And the other part I like about it is the measurement side. And you brought this up before around the values. And I'm interested because I think a lot of times when we talk about purpose, and when I think also when people talk about values, and even probably culture, right? That something people think is a bit nebulous or intangible or whatever. So what are some ways that you do measure the implementation of the values outside of putting it into performance reviews, which obviously is a really tangible thing because you're giving people a score? But what are some of the other ways it shows up? What are some things that you measure that you would consider to be measures of sort of values and action and culture and purpose and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I think the performance management piece on a quarterly basis is obviously a foundation, right? But we don't live in quarterly updates. We live in hour by hour updates. So for me, the big thing is providing the framework to the team so they know how to communicate, right? They've got the framework to communicate, and they're also able to call each other out if someone's off. That's really where it matters. Right? It doesn't matter if I'm sitting down with someone every 3 months, but then for the other 89 days, there's issues going on with values and no one's flagging it, or no one's calling each other out, or no one's holding each other accountable. So, that kind of stuff is important. So, like I said before, we'd have core value call outs, people stand around and get a trophy, that kind of stuff. But it's in the day-to-day business operation, right? That's where it lives, right? I mean, that's where it has to live. And we all need to be accountable to it. So it's not really much of an answer, but I kind of just feel it's part of the language of the organization. You're giving people permission to be okay with using this framework. And I also think it's a really good way to resolve issues, if I'm honest, because, we can all get kind of caught up in what an actual issue is and talk about for 30 minutes about what the issue is. And at the end of it, it's not sure what the issue is, So you kind of, okay, let's just get to the guts of it, and let's just talk about what's really going on. Because so often we hang out in this superficial piece. We're a little bit not sure of whether we should say that, or if that's going to hurt someone's feelings, or those kind of things. But, my feeling is, as we've seen this roll out, I mean, when people really own it, it's just part of the language of the organization. And it's not easy. Like, it's not easy to get people over it, because there's a lot of skepticism, and there's a lot of, well, what's this all about? Is this just management's latest white paper they read and they're going to roll it out. It's going to be dead in a month. Like it's really important to kind of roll it out and make it measurable. But that's how it's worked for us.
Yeah, I think your answer is actually spot on, and because for me, it's not that the values culture are part of how, right? They're how we get things done. They're how we interact, how we support each other, how we communicate, how we hold each other accountable. We would say that the purpose is the why that kind of sits below all of that, and it's the why. It's you said, it's sort of, why we exist, what we're here to do, what impact we want to make. There's a vision or a dream or something at the top of where we want to get to, and the part that gets measured is the what. So if you understand why you're doing it and where you want to get to and how you actually are going to actually hold each other accountable, support each other and getting there, the very clear focus is, well, what are we actually doing? That's what gets measured. So it's not that the values are getting measured in and of themselves. They're getting operationalized in the day-to-day and on the quarterly basis in order to move forward towards the what's, and they're the KPIs and they're the objectives and the targets that people are trying to hit. So I like the answer because I think it's a reality that you're not necessarily trying to measure the purpose or measure values. You're trying to measure the impact that they have on the outcomes and the outputs that you're trying to achieve.
Look, I mean, when you're clear about, and I totally agree with you, right? The purpose is the why. For me, it's like the purpose and the values, like they tend to don't change, right? They're foundational. They're part of you. Mission and vision and all that kind of stuff, that can change with time, right? That's my view. But when you go from values, it's like, well, why do you marry your wife? Right? I mean, what was it about your wife that you loved about her, or she brought to the equation, she brought to, the relationship, and vice versa. And, you want to go off that because that stuff very rarely changes. Like where your values are now are probably going to be the same as when you're 80 years old, So when you're looking for that, like you can train skills. Everyone says you can train skills, but you can't train values, because everyone's got their own story. Everyone has a different way of getting to certain values, and maybe not every one of my values is going to be the same as someone else's, but where are those pieces where we sync together? And when you have people with the same values, man, business is a lot easier to run. Simple as that. It's a lot easier to run. It's hard to get there. It is hard, and it's timely because in business you're always looking at your numbers. All right, we've got to grow, and we've got to get funding, and all this kind of stuff, and you can tend to forget about this, and then all of a sudden you got a big business with no values, and that just doesn't seem that fun to me.
Yeah, and probably ultimately not sustainable, I think, in this day and age, where ultimately everyone's got access to so much of the same information and technology, and yes, there's innovations and everything else, but ultimately it's the people that are going to make the difference, getting the right people, attracting the right people, retaining the right people, and more those people are looking for organisations that are doing the right thing for the right reasons. And so you've clearly identified that as a priority for you guys. So switching a little bit, but still related to this, just interested in just some things that you've been really proud of, and this could be personally or professionally, but we always like to look at this in terms of impact. So when we talk about impact, we're talking about impact that you've been able to have, kind of positive impact you've had on yourself, positive the impact that you've had on people that you surround yourself with the most, which could be friends and family, or it could be teammates and other leaders in the organisation, or impact on the world. So we, world. Any impact that you've had. So what is some things that you've been able to sort of have an impact on, and that you're proud of, that you've been able to achieve throughout your career?
Yeah. Look, I'm a dad. I've got 3 daughters. I don't think I have any more important job in the world than that. And, on that topic, where I just finished a very lengthy process to define what our family values are, right? So what are our family values? So I sat down with my wife, Rachel, sat down and said, okay, let's go through the life story, right? What's led us to get here? Like, what are those foundational values that have helped us get to where we are? She runs a very successful interior design business. Obviously, I've got my thing going on. we've both been pretty lucky about where we are, but it's just like getting to that point of like, okay, what is that? But how do we instill that into the girls, right? Like, what's the best way to do that? So that's a work in progress. One guy who worked for us a while ago and then came back to work for us again, this is just kind of coming up right now, was when he came back, he said, Mikosi was always the gold standard for me when I was going to work at other places. Like that, you guys were always the gold standard. And he ended up coming back. So for me, I'm proud that like, okay, he went to go try find somewhere else, but he couldn't find it, so he came back. So that was a source of pride. I have a challenge putting my finger on any one thing, because for me, and who knows, maybe because I've got ADD or something, but I'm always in the moment, right? I'm always thinking about, okay, what do I need to get done this week, this month, today? And sometimes for me, the leadership piece, like leadership is very important for me because I've done a hell of a lot of work just on my own self and my own mindset to try to make sure I'm optimizing myself. And I just see that the biggest thing I can do is help people get out of their own way. Most people have the answers. They just need the right questions to get themselves there. So for me, I just want to be that person asking those questions to have people kind of get to where they need to get to or where they want to get to themselves. So for me, it's those day-to-day interactions. That's the stuff that makes me most proud.
So on leadership and mindset, what do you think are some things that you've learned about yourself from some of that work you've done, or just through the experiences that you've had, and also some of the traits that you feel are important for you to show up for other people as a leader with the right mindset?
Yeah, well, I've read my fair share of self-help books and all the rest of it. I think I'm on this never-ending journey to just constantly try to look for that 1%. And try something else. But I think the things for me, probably the biggest one is just I'm stubbornly resilient. I just cannot let go of something. If I think there's an opportunity, I will just go to the ends of the earth to try to make it happen. And sometimes that kind of goes back to that extra 5% is how many of us give up when it gets tough. And just know that it was just an extra 5% to get there, right? And we're in the Olympics right now. Right, that 5%, sometimes it's the 1% or the 0.5%. That's the difference between gold and lost, quite frankly. So it's just the resilience piece. And then the other thing is just knowing that it's all going to be okay. It'll all work out in the end. I'm always telling my kids this: don't worry, it'll all work out in the end. It'll all even out. And my experiences does always even out. So don't get kind of too stressed in the moment if you lose something that you really had high expectations on that didn't go the way you wanted to. Because what's more important is just dusting yourself off and just getting back to it. So for me, it's that kind of that monotony of just kind of continuing to push forward, like regardless of whatever challenges come. And look, there are people with bigger degrees and way smarter than I am, but I just think they're the foundational things for me that just kind of keep me going. Because like for me personally, I always want to be growing. I always want to be improving, and I always know there's gaps there for me. And maybe that's another interview with my wife about which ones are there. But anyway, that's the one that I'm seeing right now.
Well, just don't do an interview with me on that, because anyone that knows me knows I've got a long list of things that I've had to improve on in that space. But yeah, I think that resilience is a trait, of obviously successful leaders, successful athletes, military, like so on and so forth. And I think purpose, from my perspective, has always supported me in being resilient. It's been something that it's not part of the core model of resilience, if you like, necessarily, but it's a driver of resilience. It's something that motivates me to want to be resilient because I believe in something, and therefore I'm not going to give up on it until, for whatever reason, I may choose to not believe in it anymore. But if I believe in something and I, like you, see an opportunity, then I'm going to continue to go for it. And that's partly because it fits within the definition for me of what purpose is. But what are some of the drivers for you in resilience? Is it just something you've always had, or is it something you've learned? Or if you were to break it down a little bit, like what is it that makes David Madden resilient?
Look, that's a whole psychotherapy session there to unwind why I make the decisions that I make. So we're probably I don't want to put anyone in tears on that one. But look, when I look through my life, I kind of think, we obviously talked about the business pieces before, but there's just things that have happened that have made me have to be resilient, right? Made me have to stand up and just figure it out, And some of them weren't great moments, Some of the moments were like, this is the end of the world. But when I look back and I look back at the decisions that I make, that I think fuel this, they were great things that happened to me, they were really great things. And, I spent a lot of time through, teenage years and early 20s thinking they were terrible things and holding them against people and, all the rest of it like we all do. But, they were the things that kind of forced that. And, people will tell me, like, the best thing you can do if you want Dave to get something done is just tell him you can't do it. Say, yeah, that's never going to work. And then I'll just be like, okay, I have to prove them wrong. Yeah. Like, that is my mission to go do that. And that's just kind of that's just kind of my view on it.
Well, that really resonates with me. I think coming from as an athlete and coming from a life of being coached by people, not being a coach as well, but that the best coaches are the ones that could always get that extra 1 or 5% out of you, even if you were resilient, you were committed, and you were really kind of always trying at your best, but they somehow were able to squeeze a little bit more out. And that's one of the magic things being a coach or a leader. If you can help other people with that same thing, and that's quality. But obviously, as you said as well, right, at the end of the day, some of this is you learn it on the job, you learn it through life, and the saying of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is actually often the case. And I think you can look back on some things now and say, actually, that's a magic moment now because of what it led to. And at the time, it was a total
yeah.
And
most of them are. Yeah. Like most of them are, you just don't know it in the time, and that's the interesting juxtaposition we find ourselves in. We kind of get in our own heads when these moments happen, but you just don't know what kind of path they take you on, because sometimes they're very small shifts, but a small shift over a longer period of time makes a very big difference. So yeah, I agree with you.
To have a successful career you've had, a multi-time entrepreneurial way, there must be some meaning to it. So what are some of those things that experiences you've had that really just make it meaningful to you, this process of building and growing a business with the right people?
One underlying feeling or thought that I have is I think business can be an amazing conduit for change. I think we're in this political landscape right now where people are just disengaged. Like, we don't trust our leaders. Like, so whatever they say, whatever, I don't believe it, I'm going to go back to my life. So I really think we're in a position right now where business can be such a catalyst for change. And, we're close to 300 employees, 250, 260 employees right now. Now, like, that's 250 to 260 people we could help them change. Maybe one thing they see about how work should be, right? Or what an employer should be or should do. And, back to that story before with that guy who came back, like, I would hope that people see us as a gold standard, right? Because I'm proud of that. Because I've worked for businesses, and we all have, where you don't feel that way. And you're just looking for your next gig. So I think that's an element of, like, how to redefine, like, what a business's role in society is. And, one of the things that we're kicking off right now is we want to put 10,000 kids through school. Like, that's a lot of kids. And it's a pretty big goal. We're not too sure how we're going to do it, but we're committed to it, so we'll go figure it out now, right? So hey, but you know what? Even if we're 10% successful, cool. All right, well, 1,000 kids just went through school, so that's good, right? So I think with pieces with that, guys, our team get behind us on that, and, we're also in a process right now of measuring that. We're not just looking, okay, what's our P&L and what's our margin from last month, and what does it relate to, the previous year, the previous month, all the rest of it. We're building it to a point to say, all right, how many kids did we put through school last month, right, with what we've committed to? So it's like tying in that purpose, on the day-to-day. But look, as for the just general meaning thing, man, honestly, it goes day by day. Sometimes I feel like I have it, sometimes I feel like I don't. But I do love being a leader. I just love being a leader, and I love challenging myself. and I love challenging other people because I just feel there's a lot of untapped potential. And it's back to what you said about the coaches that can find that extra 1 or 5%, because frankly, they're the ones that don't buy your stories. They see a bigger version of you, not the version that you're in right now where you're on the ground sweating, panting, breathless, like whatever the situation is. They just see a bigger version. And I think if you can see people for the bigger version of who they are rather than whatever the circumstances at the moment are, when you link up to people like that's a powerful way to see people. And look, do I do it every day? No, of course I don't. I'm not Buddha. But that should be the vision. So it's just like being able to get the best out of people, but mainly just helping them get out of their own way. I mean, I have a coach. I need someone to get me out of my own way, right? So
yeah, and I mean, then there's a whole other session on the value of coaching and everything else. But I've got one other question, but I want to just tease one out a little bit here quickly on the 10,000 kids, because you mentioned it and you kind of just brushed over it. It's like, we're doing this thing, we're going to put 10,000 kids through school. And I want to give you guys kudos for that, because I've read about that. And when you are talking about the role of business in society and redefining business, and that business is a catalyst for change, like these are all fundamental beliefs that I have, which is why I do what I do and why I've done what I've done. But to be able to essentially carve out a bit of profit from every project that you guys work on, to support kids, and these primarily, I think, kids in really underserved educational opportunities in South Africa, right? So it's really, really transformative for these kids, for them to have a full education, is an incredibly powerful a component of a shared purpose that I really, really hope resonates with your clients and with your employees, and is something that everybody can contribute to, not just financially, but actually contribute to and get involved with, and get more meaning out of the value that you're already delivering to them, right? Whether that's your employees or whether it's your clients, because everybody's contributing to this other bigger thing. And I think it's a really incredible way of operationalizing something that's incredibly impactful on a day-to-day basis, that can be something that everybody can get behind. So I just wanted to highlight that, because there's so many businesses that talk a good game about this stuff, but you guys are really going for it. And I appreciate the fact you're like, we don't know how we're going to do it yet either, but we're going to work it out. You know what? I think you're going to get a lot of people to back you up with that. So, fantastic. That's really amazing to see.
Yeah, we'll see. But again, it's a funny thing, right? Because these are the kind of things that don't show up on an income statement or don't show up on a balance sheet, right? But they're things that are important. And, if we're to net it out and, I don't know, put the latest AI algorithm across it to say, well, how many more clients did we get because of that? How many more people want to join Mikosi because of that? Who knows? Maybe whatever we spent on it, we got back in that, right? But that's not what it's about. That's definitely not what it's about. But what I'm trying to bring the parallels between is, sometimes these softer things can just be seen as airy-fairy softer things. But I think if you really dive into it, it just makes you a better business. Higher quality people want to work for you. Clients have an extra reason to want to work for you because they get behind it. And we've had great great feedback with clients and our employees. Gives them something to work towards, right? It's back to the purpose thing. Like, we're clear about what our purpose is. This is where we're going. So you want to join the ride? Cool, join the ride. If not, that's fine too. How can you help us? How can we get a partnership going, right? So that's the way we see it.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. So this tees up nicely the last question, which is another one we always start them with the same questions. But when we look at purpose from an individual perspective, we simplify it into three things. We call it the purpose fuse formula, which is purpose equals passion plus application plus impact. So passion is the things that you care about, things you believe in, the things that you enjoy. The impact is the me, we, world thing that we said, right? So the impact you can have on yourself, with those closest to you, whatever, however big you want to go in terms of that positive impact. 10,000 kids, pretty big impact. And at the intersection of those two things is kind of the so what, which is the application, right? So what does that mean for you on a day-to-day basis, and month to month, and year to year? Like, what are some of the things you can actually do to live at this intersection of the passion and the impact? And if you can do that, the more you do that, the more you're living in love. So if you were to take each of those three things and summarize them into either just a word or sentence for you, for David Madden, what's your passion? What's the impact? And what's your application like? How have you been able to apply that to your day to day?
Yeah, okay. I feel like I'm going to talk about things I've already talked about today, but to wrap them up, look, passion as I just love running a business. I love being a leader. I love running a business. I just love that responsibility I have. So that's one. So call it leadership. The impact. Look, we've obviously talked about the impact with with the 10,000 kids, but the impact is, in one word, would probably be new way of working. That's 4 words, but let's take out the spaces and make it one. And what I mean by that is, I always think if someone works for us for 3 days or 3 years, I hope they've seen a better way to do things. And the application is obviously the business is my outlet, right? Running a business is the outlet. So you could maybe call that entrepreneurship. I realize I put 2 of those 3 into 1 word, but anyway, that's what I got.
Yeah, it's a word or a sentence, really. But I think that what I love about that is it sums up you, like how you are living your purpose, because you love being a leader, you love disrupting and doing things differently, and ultimately building things through the business is the vehicle that enables you to bring that to life. So that was a 10 out of 10 answer.
I'll take that.
Awesome. Well, David, that wraps up episode 6. So I really enjoyed it, and it was great to get an inside track into sort of the entrepreneurial mindset and some of the successes and the operationalization of the values and how it's all kind of been purpose driven for you. And appreciate how you're living this yourself and walking the walk, and not just talking the talk, which is one of the things that winds me up the most. So appreciate you being here, appreciate what you're doing. I'm excited to continue to follow your success, and at some point I hope to come out to the West Coast and actually share a drink with you as well.
Sounds good to me. Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. It's been a good chat with you.
Cheers. Thanks.
Bye.
And learn more about the power of purpose at purposefused.com.